here and get ready. This is the Noise Pollution Podcast.
Oh, hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Noise Pollution Podcast. I'm your host, Blake. If you're new around here, thanks for being here. I appreciate you so much for checking out this podcast. And for those who are returning again for another episode, welcome back. I'm glad you're here as well. I hope you all are doing fantastic wherever you are listening to this podcast. And whatever you're doing, I hope it's a great day. And just thanks for being here. I always appreciate it. I took a week off from publishing an episode. I won't go into too much detail because I know people really don't care. And it's okay. It's like no big deal. I took some time off just for a little bit of self-care and just to kind of reset my brain a little bit. When I record these episodes, especially when I do solo episodes like this one is today, I need to be in the right state of mind. And I'm not saying that I wasn't in the right state of mind this past week. However, it's always good to kind of sometimes take a break from things, to kind of just bring yourself back to just like a reset in a way. I've had it before to where I've been recording episodes and where my head wasn't just quite wasn't in the right headspace, and I've sat down and recorded an episode where I said to myself oh my gosh, I need to get an episode out. It's been a week. I got to put something out there, and I've recorded over an hour's worth of an episode before. And once I played it back and listened to it, it was just garbage. And what did I do with that hour-plus long episode? I scratched it. And that's because it wasn't my best quality. It wasn't my best content. And I felt that it definitely was not worth putting it out there for you guys. You guys invest time into subscribing and listening to this podcast. And while I appreciate that so much, I'm not going to put something out there that is garbage. If it's an hour-long episode, it's got to be good. Time's a very important thing anymore these days, and a lot of us have less and less free time as it is, with the constant change of work and family, whatever else that we have going on in our lives. It seems like we all seem to be just a little bit busier these days. And like I said, I'm not going to be putting content out that is just garbage. If I'm not happy with it, you guys probably won't be happy with it either. So it starts with me. So if I'm not happy with it, you guys will not hear it. I can guarantee that. But yeah, I just wanted to take a little time off to kind of have some self-reflection and kind of just take a little break. You know what I mean? I love podcasting, but it is a lot of work. And while I absolutely love it to pieces, it can kind of get bogged down a little bit. But I'm here today. I'm here now. And my ramble about that is over at this point. All right. I'm going to jump into a couple of housekeeping things real quick. I'm going to start shortening this portion of these episodes out. The introduction portion of these episodes. So you guys are just like, come on, Blake, just get to the content already. I know where your Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff is. But hey, guys, there might be new listeners here, okay? I have to be putting content out as if there's someone new here every single episode. Even just one person. Maybe that person found me on accident and they're tuning in oh, well, I liked it. What else is there? Well, you are in luck, new listener. And recurring listener. Anyway, guys, previously on the podcast, we interviewed Dr. Brandon Barton, who is a assistant professor of biological sciences from Mississippi State University. We talked noise pollution, not the podcast, actual real noise pollution, and his research on that, and also mass mortality events in nature, like when you see on the news about 300 deer just dropped dead overnight. We talked about that. It was really cool. But so if you caught that episode, very much appreciate it. I know Brandon appreciates that as well. He was really excited to come on the podcast and share his research and share all the studies and things that he's been up to down at the University of Mississippi. So again, Brandon, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. things to look forward to. I got a Swapcast coming up real soon with my boy Brandon from Badass American Heroes. That's coming up in the next couple weeks. Details to follow after this episode comes out. So yeah, so stay tuned for that goodness. It's going to be amazing. Got some new shit I'm going to be dropping for you guys, so I'm really excited. I know Brandon's super excited for it as well. So just keep your eyes peeled, guys, and you'll find out what's going on soon enough. Speaking of where to keep your eyes peeled to, so social media, I'm all over the place. All right, I'm on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, search Noise Pollution Podcast. There's a like page and there's a closed group. I encourage you all to like the page and join the closed group. It's a lot of fun. We have some pretty crazy, cool conversations. You know, people post things all the time. Facebook, Noise Pollution Podcast. Like the page, join the group today. Don't delay. I'm also on Instagram. Just go on there, search for Noise Pollution Podcast. It'll come right up. Make sure you follow me on there too. I do a lot of stuff on there. Instagram's probably my most preferred platform of choice when it comes to social media. It's just more creative. And I'm also on Twitter as well. If you have a Twitter page, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back. And that Twitter is at Pollution Radio. Now I can't do at Noise Pollution Podcast because it's just too long for Twitter. It doesn't like it, so that's why that's Pollution Radio. Not to confuse anybody, but that's just what it is. And this episode, it should be up on YouTube as well. So if you're at work or if YouTube is just one of your preferred platforms, I'm also on YouTube. Just go to there and search for Noise Pollution Podcast and subscribe. More details to follow with that very, very soon. Really looking forward to some things coming up on YouTube. But that's it, guys. Oh, I do want to mention something real quick. So for those who are recurring listeners, again, I appreciate your constant support, and it means a lot to me. You know, this podcast is growing. It really is. It's creating such a reach, not just within the U.S. alone. I think I only have like 2 or 3 more states in the U.S. that have yet to listen from. I'm able to pull that information from my podcast hosting website, not just within the U.S. but all over the damn world. This podcast is global, man. I'm in over 20 countries now, and it's a really incredible feeling. And not just like one listen, like I have continued subscribers in those countries. So if you're listening from, I don't know, Germany, Poland, or New Zealand, Australia, any of those places, appreciate you so much. It's just really humbling to feel that just such a little podcast here is having such a reach. But what I wanted to ask you guys is, if you're a recurring listener, share this with someone who hasn't heard of this podcast before. You know, friends, coworkers, family, you know, whatever. Just, or even online, your Facebook page, whatever. You know, I have the like page you can share posts from. I do post full episodes in the closed group as well. So if you do want to listen on Facebook, I do post them there as well. Only in the closed group, so you get access to that only if you're in the group. But that's it, guys. So I know I said I wanted to shorten up this intro portion. Now I'm rambling on to about 12 minutes here, so I apologize for that. We're just going to go ahead and jump right into the content of this episode. And what we're going to be talking about today, and again, if you haven't realized this yet, it's a solo episode. I haven't done one of these in a little while, so I'm looking forward to this one. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. And what I am wanting to talk about today is education. Now, I know the term education is a very broad term that we see and hear constantly. And it's not necessarily what we're being taught, per se, that I want to discuss and share, you know, today in this episode. By the way, it's very early in the morning. I've been up since about 5 o'clock, getting ready to set up. It's now getting ready to go on 7 o'clock here. You know, had some delicious coffee, and I'm raring to go. I'm raring to go. Dive into this conversation. But the purpose of what I wanted to discuss today in regards to education is the killing of our creativity. Now, it almost seems that like killing creativity and education, like they kind of don't mean the same thing. But I feel, and this is just me viewing the status of education and and creativity in the United States. And my personal experiences with education, public education, and, further education, stuff like that, is that I feel that our education system within the U.S. does not always necessarily promote creativity. And I reflect back on this into my life. And I know it's not just my life. I see it all the time. I see it today. I've seen it, decades ago. I'm almost 30 now, so I've been around for a little bit. But I feel our education system doesn't promote creativity as it probably used to. I can remember as a kid being in school and art being a subject that I absolutely dreaded and hated. I mean, we had music class as well, which is also another form of, creativity, being, learning music and making music and all of those things. I did enjoy music. I didn't really understand it, and I kind of still don't to this day. I can't keep a beat to save my life. I can metal scream, but that's about it. But I feel our education system doesn't promote creativity anymore these days. And why I wanted to talk about it is because it's something that I've recently come into a very profound understanding of. Definitely within myself and just viewing the world around. I can think, like I said, I can think back to a kid and dreading art class. And I know I definitely am not the only one who has dreaded art or those subjects because I didn't have the patience for it. I wasn't taught how to be creative and let my mind just let go and just create something. Not even just art. I never was a good artist, but even just trying to even do that to begin with, I never really allowed myself to explore that portion until I started this podcasting thing these days. I have a job now where I don't really have the ability to express creative, freedom, creative talent or whatever. That's why I have this podcast. And while this podcast is my second full-time job, it's not necessarily paying the bills yet. But creativity is something that we absolutely need in our life. It's essential. Thinking back personally, it's one of the main components that I realized that I was missing in my life, that I was missing out on such a huge portion of happiness because I wasn't creating anything for a portion of my life, and I was miserable. I was so unhappy. And to think back real quick, I'll give you a quick backstory. So it was about 2 or 3 years ago, and I've been at my current job for almost 6 years now. And while it's a great job and it does pay, the bills and everything, it's a very uncreative job. And without going into too much detail and giving too much away, because, like you guys know, I keep that stuff out of the podcast. It's not the most important thing in my life right now. But what that job lacked is a sense of creativity. And I really realized this. And like I said, it was a few years ago. Me and a friend of mine, we installed a paver stone patio at my house. Just a little 9x9 paver stone patio with river rock and stuff like that. It took about 2 days to do it, and it was a lot of hard work. And I had this concept in my mind of what I wanted to create here for this patio. And I drew it out, I visualized it for a long time, and then, with the help of a friend who had a lot of knowledge into building patios and going into, and, helping me out with it. With his assistance, we created this patio. I know it may sound silly to you, and that's fine, but the end result, it came to fruition exactly how I pictured it in my mind. So I created that. I made that patio from a vision that I had in my mind, and it was one of the most satisfying feelings that I've had in a very, very long time. Now, before the job that I had today, I used to work in a machine shop. I was a CNC operator, and I used to make big ass transmission housings for Caterpillar machines, like cats, the big tractors and backhoes and stuff like that. Absolutely massive machines. But even still to this day, now this is going on almost 6 years ago now, I still have such a profound amount of gratitude for that job and how much I've actually learned while I was there. I mean, while I was doing it, I didn't realize it, but as I got older, maybe a little bit wiser, I guess, but looking back, I had such a great realization that that job was great for me, and that it was fulfilling that creativity bug that I needed in my life without even realizing it. It took going away from that job and being, I guess the best word I could use is stagnant for a while, made me realize that, just that, and that how I was using that creative sense of me that I now didn't have in my life, and I was miserable and I wasn't happy. Long story short here, and then eventually I discovered podcasting, so I was getting my creative outlet fix. But to go back to talking about education, now I know I'm far from alone with this, but listeners, raise your hand if you remember everything from high school. Oh, wait a moment. No, not everyone? Okay, good, me either. Our education system is designed to prepare us for the real world. We graduate high school at 17, 18 years old. So the first, 18 years of our life are in an educational institution, so to speak. We spend so much time at school, but how much are we really retaining? Are we even using a lot of these skills that we learn in school to this day? No, we're not. While I loved, history and social studies and stuff like that, how often do I use that stuff to this day? Not so much. Not to rag on history and stuff like that, because history is an incredibly important subject that I think we're seeing a lot nowadays with this big socialist movement, and that it would seem like a lot of these people have never opened a history book before, or are failing to look at countries that are practicing socialism nowadays and realizing that it's a failed system. Again, one of the points of education is that we have history, and the bad parts of our history, it's there for us to learn from, so we don't make the same mistakes that have been made in the past. But we're at such a major pivotal moment within growth within our country, such a profound changing era, and it's very rapidly changing, and it's very, very earth-shattering, I guess, is the best way I could, think about it, I guess. But our schools are not teaching people how to be creative. We're not teaching people how to be successful. We're not teaching people how to be entrepreneurs, business owners, and the like. We mass produce education on such a level that it seems like we kind of missed the point all along. Our education more or less seems like nowadays a factory, a mass-produced factory of education. To get into school, throw as much information at you as we can, and after that, your job is to regurgitate that information onto a piece of paper, and then you are judged based on how much you can retain in the form of a test. Now, again, another poll for the audience here. By a raise of hands, how much of that information have you retained? How many tests that you can remember taking? Hell, I don't. Maybe it's just me here. I don't know. But I have a very good feeling that it's not just me. I know that. But I guess the whole point of really what I'm trying to get at here is that we really need to start looking for better methods of education. Now, as you know, and I'm not the biggest fan of government. And, after working with the government for a while, being in the military, you quickly realize that nothing moves quickly. It's a very slow process, and it seems like the more the government has control of some things, the less and less that actually really gets done. And based on your political standpoint is your take on how education should be. A lot of the things that we see now is Common Core. And I know those of us who are around my age, I'm 29 now, if you missed that earlier, but we didn't do any of that when we were kids. We did math, 2 + 2 = 4. Now, I don't understand Common Core, and, to preface this a little bit, now we homeschool our kids. I have 3 kids, and they are all homeschooled. And this is solely based on personal experience with the public education in today's time. My son was in kindergarten, and you know, you can think, most of us I know can think back to kindergarten. It's basically another year of preschool before you go into first grade, where you're learning how to play and doing shapes and colors, but it's all play based. It's all, you know, play orientated. You know, we're not just sitting in desks for 8 hours a day. That's not the case anymore. You know, when my son was in kindergarten, he was in a desk all day with a 15-minute recess. Now, I know this isn't the same all across Pennsylvania and the country, but when we started seeing, my wife and I, when we started seeing such a massive toll being taken on our son's personal well-being. Now, he is an extremely smart kid. He's a math whiz. He does math nowadays that he just looks into a book. He reads the content and he gets it because he's given that opportunity to self-learn. It's not just self-learning all the time. We help him all the time as well. But I'm just using math as one subject that he's really well at. You know, he was coming home with stacks of homework every single night, 5 days a week. He would have homework every night in kindergarten at 5 years old. Talk about pressure when a 5-year-old who is just really starting to grasp or just starting to branch out in emotions and stuff like that, really developing the mind. And then we're just going to come in and just bring it all to shambles with, you know, all just piles of homework with subjects that and methods of teaching that parents are not familiar with anymore. I'm talking about Common Core here. Classrooms are even fuller nowadays than they used to be. So how is one teacher expected to successfully teach, you know, 20 to 30 kids that are very young and to actually have them retain the knowledge? Now, look, not, you know, some kids, they actually do well with that and they excel with it, and that's fine and dandy, but that's not all kids. And I understand the difficulty and the challenge of trying to cater to the needs of, you know, 20 plus children in one single classroom. It's impossible to do that. And, you know, my hat's off to teachers out there for trying to do that. And my issue with this whole thing is not within teachers. It's within our entire educational system. It's mass produced. It's taught children just to cram as much information as they can as possible, and then regurgitate that information out later on. Because I know as a kid that once that test was over and we were done that subject, I brain dumped it. Whatever it was, I was just like, okay, it's done. It's out. It's gone. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's not how it should be. You know, I'm not saying everyone should homeschool either, because, you know, sometimes that's not logistically possible in a lot of situations. But if you've thought about it, then maybe give it a shot. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not advocating for homeschooling here. It's what fits our family's lifestyle the best. But what I'm able to do with homeschooling is explore our kids' minds in the way of what they're interested in. We can educate them on what interests them the most, and then we can go from there. You know, for a while I can think back, and my son was super interested in space. So what did we do for months on end? We did nothing but look at planets and research space and, you know, watch documentaries and all sorts of things. But it gave us the opportunity to explore what he was interested in. And I can tell you to this day, and this was going on 2 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago now at least, that he still retains that information because he was excited to learn it. You know, I was never excited to go to school, and no one really is excited to go to school. It's just because you got to get up early and you got to, you know, get dressed, get ready, and then you have to go sit for 8 hours a day. You know, especially young children, they are not designed to be sitting down for that long. They have so much energy. And then that falls into all these teachers and all these kids saying that all these kids need to be on and that all these kids have ADD and they all need to be on Ritalin or what's Adderall. And I see so many kids on Adderall these days. Is it ADD really? Or is it just the fact that they're very young children and they can't sit still for hours on end? Most of us, our minds have, without even realizing, over 50 thoughts a second. Whether you realize them or not, it's happening. And especially at a younger age, your mind is constantly going. And, again, this kind of all falls back onto government control of everything and, states having control of education and stuff like that. And I understand the premise behind all of that is so we have some sort of standard across the board and that our children are getting some sort of education. I get that, and I totally understand it. But we have politicians who are deciding what's best for our children. The children are not deciding what works for them. And I know children don't necessarily run the world, so to speak, but they're the next up-and-coming generation. And if we're not educating them to the best of our ability, we've already lost. That's just where history's mistakes get repeated. If our children are not educated enough. And don't get me wrong, I am extremely grateful that we have the ability in this country to be able to homeschool and that we do have the right to a free public education. That's amazing because there's places in this world where even just that does not even exist whatsoever. There are kids growing up in places around the world never taught how to read, never taught how to write, and it's humbling to even know that option is here and it's available to us very easily. So I'm not saying that it's all a bad thing, but what we're failing in and what we're lacking in is the loss of creativity in our lives and our children too, especially. When schools have financial problems, what's one of the first things that schools like to cut? Which departments? Usually the arts and music, because they're viewed as non-essential to education, which I think is a massive, massive mistake. It shouldn't be one of the first things to cut. It should be fought for, because without having the ability to express creativity, you lose so much more than just being able to just write or to do art on a canvas, to be able to paint a picture or write some sheet music or whatever. But that's a massive skill that we are missing out on as young children. With creativity, not just comes art form, but because it becomes problem solving. It becomes learning how to articulate. You have something, and you learn more about it in order to produce whatever it is that your mind has come up with. The creativity process. It's a very important aspect of our lives that I think so many of us lack. And I know I had such a major lack in my life that when I finally built that patio, I had such a profound satisfaction that I had something in my mind and it came to fruition in physical form. It was such an amazing feeling that I realized that it's what I needed for so long. And quickly, I want to touch back onto the time in our lives where my son was in public school. When we pulled him out, once we noticed his just general well-being kind of taking a decline in a negative way, we pulled him out. And it was probably about a month before his birthday. And you know how school works for birthdays. You send invitations out to all your classmates, and then you have parties and whatever else. So we pulled him out, and a lot of parents, we still had the party, and people showed up. Like, oh, hey, did you guys move or whatever? Like, oh, no, we decided to homeschool. Like, oh, wow, really? Okay. And, well, why'd you do that? And then we explained to them how we saw such a massive change in their well-being. And, not to sound negative or condescending to some of these parents, but their response to this was, oh, really? That's interesting. I've seen the same things in my children as well. Well, if that hasn't raised a red flag for you, then I don't know what to tell you, because you have to look out for your children and their best interest all the time. You are their guide. You're their waystone to life. And if you can't take in our children's struggles and observe them and be like, hey, well, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to make this better? We're failing right there in them. Unless you take something and you do something about it. If you do nothing about it, then we're just failing ourselves. And like I said, I'm not advocating for homeschooling here. It doesn't work for all families, and I totally get that. And I'm not against public education either. I just think that there has to be some change that takes place. What our education system is based upon is the readiness of our nation in wartime. That's really the core essential of our education. They need people to have some sort of baseline education before they enter the real world, right? And most of the things that we do in this country is based on our nation's readiness to defend her if need be. I talked about this before, but cannabis and marijuana, why it has such harsh restrictions and on a federal level, is because they don't want a nation full of pot smoking hippies, so to speak. I know they really won't be, but they don't want a nation full of pot smoking hippies, essentially. And because cannabis does have some very profound effects on the mind and the body, and can have some very profound realization. It's restricted so much because they can't have a nation full of pot smoking hippies, and I'm using this term very broadly. I think you all got that by now. Going off to fight wars. Now, I've referenced this before, but if anyone's seen the movie Pineapple Express, and this is a very, terrible reference, I guess, but if you can recall into the beginning when there's that guy, the soldier, they're in like an underground bunker and they're testing drugs on people to see the effects on them. And there's this one private in there and they're asking him questions and he's just like laughing and rambling on and talking shit and very non-compliant. And then he's just the officer, that general, colonel, whatever it was that's outside that room. He's just like, illegal. So our nation's readiness is dependent on our education, right? But again, mass-produced education is not the best education. I think we can all get behind that, and that's what it's turned into. It's turned into a massive gear turning, just spitting kids out every year and say, here you go, here's the real world, get to it, get to work. Our children are taught to go work in factories and are maybe not necessarily taught to go work in factories, but the mindset of the education is similarly based to an assembly line. You just move on through on the conveyor belt, get thrown with textbooks and knowledge, and are expected to retain as much as you can, regurgitate it, and then are judged based on a letter grade, not based on performance. And not all kids learn the same way. Now, I was your very average student in school. I was a C student. Maybe I threw a couple B's in there. But where I excelled the most was like things like woodshop and stuff like that. Where I was able to express creative freedom and actually make something with my hands. And those things to this day, they stick with me. Like, I remember so much from like woodshop class. And I use a lot of that knowledge gained in that class, even still today. I do a lot of projects around the house and stuff like that, and I retain so much from it because I love doing it. And if you love doing whatever it is in education, you're going to retain as much as you possibly can because you thoroughly enjoy it. So we have to look at our education system as a whole and try to come up with something that's better for our children. Is this an easy process? Absolutely not. It's extremely difficult. It's at such a large level. It's extremely difficult, and it's hard. I totally understand it. I understand why the education system is the way it is, but there has to be some sort of change to how we conduct our business as education, as leaders of our country, as adults, as politicians. Because if we're able to hone in on what's best in our children and explore their interests farther in depth, I believe that if we're able to capitalize on creativity in our children and teaching our children how to be successful and how to be mindful and all of those things, if we're able to capture that and have these things grasped within our children, and even adults too, that we will see more change in this country in the next 3 decades than we would in the last 100 years. that's all I got to say about that, guys. It's been a while since I did a solo episode here, but I still do enjoy doing these. It's the whole purpose of this podcast is just to talk about these major paradigm things that we face daily in our nation and the world, not just the United States of America, but the entire world. And I love taking these things and exploring them farther. And I could have gone much deeper. I could have done a bit more research. Of course, there's always more to do, right? But at the end of the day, you have to just sit down and hit record and go. So guys, thank you so much for being here for this episode. I really appreciate you investing the time out of your day to sit down with me and have a conversation with me. And the conversation doesn't have to die here at this episode, guys. Go join the Facebook group. Like I said, I post a full episode in there every single time a new episode is released. And from there, we can dive much deeper into conversations like this. Because the more better conversations that we have about these certain topics, the more profound change that we could probably have in this nation. And I'm not saying we're all going to agree on all things all the time. Totally get that. Like I said, we all view the world differently in our own eyes. It's all about the perspectives, guys. I preach it. I'm going to stop rambling for now. So real quick, join the Facebook group, like the page, check us out on Instagram and Twitter as well. I also do have an email. I forgot to put that at the beginning, but if you want to email me and talk further, or if you have show topics or whatever else you got, you can DM me on any of those platforms, or you can also shoot me an email, and that email is noisepollutiontalks@gmail.com. Guys, lines are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Do not be afraid to reach out and to say, hey, I enjoyed the show, or hey, this sucked, whatever it is. Your feedback means the world to me, so if you could share this with a friend and reach out to me. I love hearing from you guys. It really means a lot, whether good or bad. In the end, it makes me a better podcaster. It makes me have the ability to produce better content. And the more people listening, guys, the more this podcast grows. The more it grows, the better guests I can have on, to talk about whatever else. So, this is, like I said, this podcast is growing very quickly, and it's all thanks to you guys. And my heart goes out to all of you, and I appreciate you all so much. I'm extremely grateful for you all. But that's it, guys. That's all I got for this episode. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it so much. I'm Blake. This is the Noise Pollution Podcast. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.